Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 954B, and today's date is April 25th, 2016, and the title of the episode is, We Are 3 to 4 Months Away from a Gigantic Event That Will Spark War. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, as we discussed in previous reports, Obamacare, it is cracking, falling apart right in front of our eyes. And we know that United Healthcare, they're withdrawing from Obamacare. But the thing that they're not really telling you about is they're withdrawing from 34 exchanges. And I know the administrators of Obamacare are saying, oh, it's not a big deal, who cares? But what happens is that other health insurance providers look at their situation, and most of them are losing money in Obamacare. And when they reach a certain point, many of the others are going to start pulling out. And what we're seeing right now is that United Healthcare's departure, it's really bad news for other carriers. Right now, carriers are already suffering unsustainable losses. Even after the government threw all these subsidies it had at the exchanges, they spent billions and billions of dollars. 70% still report losses. Now, to make up these losses, what are the insurance companies doing? They're increasing the premiums and increasing the deductibles. Now, is this a benefit to the people? Is this affordable health care? No, it's not. But they need to do this because this system is not designed to be a benefit to the people. It's designed to bring profits into these health insurance companies, and the only way they can bring profits in is if they have the entire country all filed into this system. And guess what? The people are not all in. This is the problem. This is why they put the tax penalty on there, because they thought they were going to use this to push people into the system. But when people don't have money, and especially when premiums go up, I mean, you can spend $90 a month on the penalty, or you can spend, $900 to $1,800 a month on health insurance that you're not even going to use. And most people saying, you know something? I'd rather spend the $90 in penalty. It's a lot cheaper. Now that varies, between family and family, between each family. But we see right now that the carriers, they are struggling at this point. But don't worry, they have the bailout clause in Obamacare. If there is a complete disaster, the government will bail them out. But we see right now that the whole thing is starting to crumble and fall apart at this point. Now the question I have is, all these people who've been paying into it and all these people that paid the penalties, once they come to the conclusion, if they ever do, that Obamacare is not working, or Congress finally hears the people and says, okay, this is no good for the people, and they find that, wait, it really wasn't constitutional, do all the people get refunded for all those penalties because it was never constitutional and they had to pay it? That's interesting. Now, Saudi Arabia, we understand that the president was visiting Saudi Arabia because we know that Saudi Arabia, they're trying to move away from the petrodollar. They're trying to get out of the oil business. They want to sell a lot of the assets of the United States. And of course, the United States can't have this because they need to keep Saudi Arabia, Libya, Yemen, and all the other Middle Eastern countries on the petrodollar system. They can't have this removed or the entire system falls apart. And this is why the U.S. government and Obama administration is waving around the 28 pages, and they're using this as leverage against Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, this is going back many years where they said they had the 28 pages, and they found other secrets, buried deep in the basement and archives of the government where they have other information. But all of this is a psyop. All of this is being used to make you believe that Saudi Arabia is responsible for all of this. Now, the only reason they're doing this is because they need leverage. They need leverage against Saudi Arabia. They need to keep them in line. And if they decide to move away from the petrodollar, which looks like they're doing, they will become the enemy of the United States. So they'll need this to show the world that, see, they're the ones who did 9/11. We need to attack them. So all of this is being done not because they're the real perpetrators of this crime of bringing down the World Trade Center towers. We discussed this many, many times before. But they're using it as leverage to keep each one of these countries in line, especially Saudi Arabia. The other countries, they have to use military force. Now, out in North Korea, we can see that the United States is continually provoking North Korea. And we know that the earthquake that happened in North Korea, they were out there telling us that it was some type of nuclear detonation, but there's no radiation or any type of proof. But that didn't matter. And North Korea came out and said, listen, we will suspend our missile program if the U.S. talks to us. Maybe we have a discussion about stopping the exercises in South Korea. Maybe we can talk about the military assets that you placed in South Korea. And Obama, he's not even taking this seriously. He doesn't believe them. Actually, he doesn't care, because he knows that they need to provoke one of these countries. And it looks like North Korea will be the easiest country to provoke at this time to start a war. And they don't want to have talks. They don't want to have talks with Russia. They try to avoid Russia at all costs. They didn't want to have talks with Russia in Ukraine. They don't want to have talks with Russia in Syria. They don't want any of this. They want to continually tell us that these countries are our enemies. That's it. Now we can see that out in Ukraine, they're not going to remove the sanctions whatsoever, because we see that Obama and Chancellor Merkel, they said the sanctions are going to stay in place against Russia, and they'll only be removed when Russia removes itself from Ukraine, or if there's a political solution. Well, they have a political solution. Kiev is supposed to be following the Minsk II ceasefire agreement, which they agreed to and signed. But guess what? They're not sticking to it. They will never stick to it, because why? They're getting ready for something very, very different. And that's an offensive in this area to take back the southeastern area and maybe even try to get Crimea back at the same exact time. Now, we understand the USS Donald Cook was very close to a base which was operated by Russia, the Kaliningrad base in Russia, and they were simulating war games against how to destroy Russian targets. And Russia was put on alert. A jet plane was flown out to the USS Donald Cook, and multiple jet planes flew by very close to the ship. And of course, the U.S. came out screaming and yelling, oh my God, they came out of nowhere. And that's what bullies do. They poke, 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 but they don't mention the part where they were very close to this base. Now, if Russia or China or North Korea had a warship right outside 70 nautical miles of the U.S. coastline, what would the U.S. do? And they were having war drills, simulations of destroying American targets. The U.S. would fly their jets to that ship to see what was going on. And that's what Russia did. Now, the new nominee for the Supreme Commander of NATO is out there saying, well, next time, Russia might not be so lucky. Next time, we might fire upon Russia. Now, of course, these are words, but you can see where their mindset is right now. You can see what they're doing at this point. Now, the U.S. is taking this a step further. For the first time in Romania, the U.S. put the next generation combat aircraft F-22s out in this country at a military base. And this is near the Black Sea port in southeast Romania. It's about 400 kilometers from the Russian military stronghold of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. And they put it there on purpose to provoke Russia. Can you imagine if Russia came in and placed fighter jets in Mexico, right on the border of the United States, or in Canada, or maybe back in Cuba? How would the U.S. react at this time? They wouldn't react too kindly about it. They would say Russia is being aggressive. They're provoking. But when the U.S. does it, the U.S. says we placed our jets out there to combat Russian aggression, which really doesn't exist. Because if you really look at it, Russia has been pushing peace all along. The United States has been pushing war. Now, the U.S. is stepping up their games with drones. Now, they used to establish bases in certain countries so they can fly their drones and bomb down certain individuals. Of course, they call them terrorists, but we know better at this point. Now, the U.S. Navy reports that it has installed its first command center for unmanned aerial vehicles aboard aircraft carriers. And the carrier is USS Carl Vinson. And this marks the start of a phased implementation of the MQ-XX system on aircraft carriers. And basically what this allows them to do is now they can sail anywhere. They don't have to go into each one of these countries. They can have them right on the aircraft carrier. They can sail them out into the vicinity of where they want to use these drones, and they can bomb the area. And we can see that this is being done on purpose. They need this to go into all those countries where Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State are, because as we know, whenever they're going after Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State, and they already have a puppet government in place, they call those people who are against the puppet government the terrorists, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, or whatever. If they're trying to remove the elected government of a country and replace it with a puppet government, they use Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, the Islamic State, as their proxy army to remove the elected government. And then those people who don't agree with this new government, they are then called the terrorists. We saw it happen in Ukraine. We see it in Yemen. We see it in Libya. We see it in Lebanon. We see it in Iraq. It's the same MO that they use over and over. Now, the Unity government on Monday, they took control of the Foreign Affairs Ministry headquarters in Tripoli. And it looks like that once the documents are signed, they'll be passing control of the complex to the north of the capital to the new government. And once everything is all said and done, we see that the Unity government's getting closer and closer of having full control of the country, which is very interesting because we need to understand what this is all about, because they've been telling us now for months that once the Unity government is in place and they invite the coalition forces in, they'll bring in troops, they'll bring in bombers, they'll bring in everything. Now they're getting set up for this because they realize they're getting closer and closer. And look at the months, the time frame that they're telling us that this is going to happen. Now in 3 months, NATO is going to be launching a naval mission off the Libya coast. 3 months, where does that bring us? Brings us very close to August. Very interesting. Italy is preparing to lead the UN-backed peacekeeping force into Libya, and they already have authorization from all the different countries, and they have authorization to stabilize the country. And we can see right now their time frame is about 3 to 4 months, which brings us into August. Remember the August date here. We hear that the U.S. warships are going to join the EU ships off the coast of Libya during the summer, the end of July, beginning of August. Same time frame. Now, of course, they're saying, oh, we're bringing all these warships in to help with the refugee problem. Really? Well, that's the cover story. The real story is they're getting ready for a major offensive in Libya. Remember, whatever they're saying, it's always the opposite. We see already that what's building up in the Middle East right now, it is growing and getting bigger, and they're getting ready for something huge. In the meantime, Syria and Russia, they've signed agreements worth 850 million euros to restore the infrastructure in that country. They have also considered the possibility of setting up joint banks to carry out transactions between the two countries, bypassing the dollar. This poses a problem for the United States government central bankers, doesn't it? They don't get their pipeline, and now they have an additional problem. Syria is getting even closer to Russia and most likely China. So what's happening here? The U.S. realizes that they have one option right now, and that is to mount major offensives in all these Middle Eastern countries, and even Ukraine. So we can see right now that Russia has intensified its bombings across Syria, driving the Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda back, and other terrorist groups. The United States has a problem with this, of course, because it is their proxy army. Now think about this for a second. We have Russia, the United States, and what is it, like 50 plus countries fighting the Islamic State. Okay, so let's include Syria too. We have all of these countries fighting the Islamic State, and the Islamic State is not wiped out of Syria or Iraq. Why is that? Do you really think it's that hard with the amount of countries with the advanced weapons? Or do you think Russia, which I do believe, is truly fighting the Islamic State, destroying them, and the U.S. and the coalition forces are supporting them? This is why it's taking so long. Why do you think the U.S. for 18 months couldn't make any headway? The most powerful country in the world with other powerful countries with advanced weaponry, they couldn't fight these forces on the ground with only basic weaponry. Because the whole thing is one big illusion. The Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government. The U.S. and the coalition forces are on one side, protecting them, fighting with them, and then we have Russia on the other side with Syria going after them. This is why we're not seeing any progress. The only progress that we ever saw was Russia and Syria when they joined forces. They started to push the Islamic State back. And now we have the United States, who is now bringing in more ground troops. And of course, just over the weekend, Obama said, I can assure you, we are not going to be bringing any ground troops into Syria. And now we get word there's 250 troops going in there. Of course, he's explaining away why he's bringing these in there. But that's a total of 300 troops that we know of. And we know there's more. But very interestingly, what we find out is that while all this is happening, we see that the air bases in northeastern Syria, the runways, like we said, they're going to be extended, and the runways are being extended about 2,500 meters in length and 250 meters in width, because they're making it possible where they can bring in jet fighters. And we can see right now that Washington wants these bases to accommodate U.S. warplanes, because they're going to use this area as a launching pad. Now, there was a ceasefire deal that was established between the Kurds and the Syrian government, and this was over the Kamishli area, and the Syrian government is saying, okay, you can control this area. And what we're seeing right now is that the U.S., they're trying to push this whole entire area in the northern part of Syria. They want control of this area. And I know Obama is out there, and he is continually saying that, it doesn't make sense to have a safe zone. We shouldn't have a safe zone. If we do have a safe zone, we need, troops in this area. We need bases in this area. And when you really look at this, this is exactly what they're doing. They're creating bases. They're setting everything up. And everything that he says is always the opposite. So he continually denounces the idea of a safe zone while they're building the area up for a safe zone. So we can see right now, whatever he's saying is the actual opposite right now. So we are seeing that things are starting to heat up. We're looking at a 3 to 4 month time period. And in that time period, where we have July or August, right in that time frame. We understand that Congress, they go on recess the end of July going into August. They don't come back until after Labor Day. And Obama pretty much has the run of the whole entire area of D.C., where he can control and do everything. And if we go back in time, back to 2013 with the sarin gas attack, we realize that it happened during that same exact time frame. 2014, what do we have? Well, right after the elections in June, where Assad won again, all of a sudden we had the Islamic State pour into Iraq and Syria in the exact same time frame. Go to 2015, all of a sudden the U.S. was bombing Syria again when Congress was recessing. And here we are in 2016, and we see ships now are being moved off the coast of Libya. Troops are being moved into Syria. We see bases are almost complete, getting ready to bring in military jets. We see Ashton Carter and Obama went around to all the coalition forces to bring in military assets, to bring in troops. And a lot of these countries are saying, yes, we're going to be going into Syria. Now, of course, this is all under the illusion that they're going after the Islamic State, but we know better. That's not what this is about. This is one gigantic push to go after Assad and really to start war with Russia. That is their plan. This is their idea. Now, a lot of countries that are going along with this might think they're going after the Islamic State, but we can see at this point that this is not what it's about. And it looks like this is going to spark World War III. And all the indicators at this point are pointing towards this time frame. Everything is being built up. Everything is being moved into place. And then we get information about North Korea, which is very interesting because we know North Korea has satellites above us. And right now we see U.S. government officials and others and other analysts trying to convince everyone that these aren't normal everyday satellites. These are satellites with maybe some type of weaponry aboard, where they can have these satellites do some type of EMP burst over the United States, which would then knock out the electrical system. Now, is this possible from that height? I really don't think so. I don't think they have anything powerful enough, but they don't need to convince everyone that they have a certain nuclear weapon. They just have to put the propaganda out there. For a false flag to work, all they have to do is convince everyone that, oh, wait a minute, remember, North Korea has a satellite which orbits above us, and they used it. And what they're saying is they have two satellites orbiting above the United States, capable of performing a surprise electromagnetic pulse attack at an altitude and trajectory that evade U.S. national missile defenses. This is coming from one of their security experts. So you can see what they're doing at this point already. Now, we know this is going to be an inside job. If the electric goes out anywhere in this country, either from an EMP, cyber attack, or anything like that, we know already at this point that this is a false flag. This is an inside job, because what they're going to do is they're going to use this event to convince the United States, Europe, and the rest of the countries that it is time to go to war. And it looks like we're headed in this direction. And as we move closer and closer to this summer, we're going to see more military assets. We're most likely going to see more troops out in this area. And it looks like they're building up for the big event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.